on the agenda is approval or revision of the agenda. Given the inclement weather, I sent out an email with some proposed changes to the agenda so we could try to shorten the meeting considerably, get everyone home before the state of emergency kicks in and the snow starts. So let's see. Referring to that document I sent earlier, is there a motion to approve the agenda with the following items tabled? 2.03, President's Report. 3.01, Public Comment. We didn't have anyone sign up for public comment. 4.06, Policy 1000 Series. 4.07, Policy 7000 Series. 5.01, 2 and 3, ongoing business. And that would be it. Is there a motion to approve the agenda with those revisions? Thank you, Cindy. Is there a second? Thank you, Daryl. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. No one's opposed or abstaining. Okay. Next on the agenda then, item 2.01, presentation, our 6-month claims audit update.
I would like the board to meet Lisa Murkowski, who has been with us officially since August, correct?
Well, it's Leslie Milanowski.
What did I say? What did I say? It is
Lisa
Milanowski. That's what I wrote it right, but I said it wrong. Sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, Leslie. All right, so she's going to give us a rundown of her recent reports from the last 6 months.
Correct.
And also perhaps share with us the new form that we, I think, are receiving, aren't we?
Until March.
Not till March?
Okay.
Okay.
Let me start with that new format. First of all, the report that I prepare weekly is currently a 3-page report. I've streamlined it. It contains all the same information that the old 3-page report consisted of, but it's just been consolidated. A lot of the information on there was repetitive, so I was able to get it down to 1 page. So that you'll start seeing that new report coming out in March. Okay. As far as my interim report that you see up on the screen, it's for the 6-month period from when I began in August. So it covers August 1st to January 31st of 2013, or 2023. Basically, my role is to ensure that all payments are statutorily legal, proper and correct, and that there are no unexplained gaps in the check numbers being issued. I generally review payments 1 day per week for the 4 district funds, those being the general fund, the school lunch fund, the special aid fund, and the capital fund. So during this 6-month period, I verified approximately 2,600 claims totaling $29,144,389. The interim report itemizes the number of irregular findings that I've encountered each week during that reporting period. And the irregularities, as described above, consist of either an incorrect invoice amount or payment amount, incorrect payee name or address, missing documentation such as an approving official signature or purchase order documentation, the backup paperwork, if sales tax was erroneously included on invoice, or if payments were submitted beyond the due date, which could result in late fees being assessed for the district. So the vast majority of the findings that I encountered during this period were very, very few, considering I reviewed 2,600 claims. I only found 25 irregularities, and generally, when you have an irregularity, they're corrected before the checks even go out the door. We're able to correct them right on the spot. If we're not, then the check is held back either until the following week or until we can reach out to the appropriate district personnel to rectify the inquiry of the problem and make sure that it's correct and resolved. So again, out of the 2,600 claims, I only had 25 inquiries. So that signifies that The accounts payable staff has been doing a really thorough job. All the payments have been statutorily, legally correct and properly paid, and everything is above board. So that is about caps it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Does anyone have a question for Leslie? We are very grateful to you for the work you do every month, every week, really, but we see a monthly report. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Dan, did you have a question? I thought you were about to say something. You sure? Okay. Okay, so moving on to item 2.02, the 2023-24 budget proposal, Part 3, Administrative Budget. Mr. Corbin?
Thank you. So this is part 2. We'll be doing the administrative component tonight, and we'll hopefully make it pretty quick and get to questions at the end. So the administrative budget, as you can see here, basically year-over-year increase to approximately $312,000 or approximately 5.1%. Current year projections call for administrative budget of $6.43 million, and we'll talk more about that in detail. So within district, those are basically the main kind of components: Board of Education, salaries and wages, materials and supplies, contractual services, and BOCE services. And the district budget within, the district budget portion is $3.1 million, and that component is projected to have an increase year over year of approximately 4.55%. And again, we'll talk about that more in detail. So first components: Board of Education, district clerk, and district meeting. As you can see, again, left-hand side, you'll have your budget codes. The middle will be the current, where we're at from a budgetary perspective at 22-23, and then to the right will be the 23-24 proposed budget. So as you can see in the bottom of the bullets, Board of Education, district meeting are both projected to be flat. District clerk increase really is due to a budget to actual adjustments. Some of the examples I wanted to give, so for the budget vote related costs, there'd be things like Board of Education certified staff, budget vote supplies, voting machines, and things of that nature. There's also Board of Ed annual conferences and dues, the CNY, as well as the New York State National School Board. But for the most part, those basically, like I said, it's year over year relatively flat. If there is any changes where there's additional votes or things of that nature, then obviously those corresponding numbers would need to change. Next, we have Chief of School Administration. Changes here really primarily reflect negotiated contractual adjustments. That includes the superintendent as well as administrative assistant position. The remaining codes were either flat or they really had minor budget to actual adjustments. Examples of some of the additional costs that were included within Chief School Administration are the NYS SBA dues, School Law Conference, or NISCUS conferences, and those would be examples of that. Next, we have Business Administration. So within Business Administration, the business administration as well as the office staff salary increases were included in there, and those increases really primarily reflect, again, the negotiated contractual adjustments, and there were a few adjustments of budget to actual that were pretty small. Outside service costs was an increase here that really kind of drove this budget area. It's primarily related to pricing increases with document storage, so Iron Mountain storage. So basically, as we maintain filing our documentation as far as the payroll, special ed, things of that nature, those are items that eventually get into putting into our Iron Mountain. There is a plan, I think, at some point to go through and we'll do digitizing of those documentation. Ideally, then this cost would minimize. Remaining codes that are in there, they were either flat or they had minor budget to actual adjustments. Some of the examples of additional costs would be ASBO dues, ASBO conference fees, and things of that nature. Next, we have the auditor, treasurer, and tax collector. The auditor and treasurer increases are really due to negotiated contractual adjustments. The tax collection increase, as you can see on the bottom, is really the one that sticks out a little bit, and that really is just an increased cost of printing and distributing tax bills. I think that came from the county maybe last year that it first started. Next, we have fiscal agent, legal, and personnel. Within fiscal agent, we have fiscal advisors, an increase there, and that code is really due to capital project needs. So as the capital project gets involved, then there'd be basically the fiscal advisor's corresponding need would increase as well. Legal fees, the second one, that's really projected to be flat year over year. There's nothing known at this point where that would be inflated. And then the last one is personnel, and that decrease is due to a reduction in BOCES employee benefit services think it's specifically related to labor relations, and that fee was reduced. Employees of some of the basic BOCE services included recruiting service, employee calling service, as well as labor relations. Next one's public information, mailing and data processing. Public info, or the BOCES communication service, is really projected to decrease slightly. They're relatively flat, really, over year. The mailing cost in the middle is really projected to be flat, and data processing is projected to increase slightly, just primarily due to BOCES service cost increase. BOCES services include NutriKids for our school lunch program, Envision that we use for more on the finance side, Parent Square with the communications aspect, and IEP Direct for our special ed folks. Insurance and tax refunds. Insurance and costs are projected to increase, and this is primarily due to a significant price increases for cyber insurance. So I think a couple of years ago is when that first started, when you started seeing some of the ransom attacks that have gone out in regards to municipalities and school districts. The corresponding, I think, following year is when we really started with the increases from that aspect as far as what schools were seeing and municipalities were seeing. The second one would be tax refunds, and that budget is projected to be flat year over year based on what we're seeing from a trend perspective. Next is BOCES administrative service fees. Basically, the three different groupings of BOCES administrative fees is projected to increase about 3.5% for the 23-24 fiscal year. BOCES administrative fees include things like their actual administrative fees, facilities rental costs, as well as the BOCES capital project pass-through fees they're passed on to districts. Next, we have supervision, and within supervision, again, similar components: salaries and wages, contractual, materials and supplies, and equipment. This budget is projected to be $3.4 million, and projected increase year over year is 5.61. And again, we'll talk about those as we go through. So within that, you got administrative and support staff. So the assistant superintendents and clerical positions are included here. Salary increases are again based on negotiated contractual adjustments. We did add one additional clerical position into the budget, or 1.0 FTE, and then the remaining codes were really either flat or had minor budget to actual adjustments. Codes included were membership fees and dues, conference fees, equipment, materials, and supplies. Next, we have, again, with administrative and support staff, we have the principals and assistant principals and their related clerical positions. Again, the salary increases were really based on negotiated contractual adjustments. There was an administrative intern position that's going to continue to be part of the budget for 23-24. And then again, remaining codes are really either flat or had minor budget to actual adjustments. Again, those codes are similar in the fact they include the membership fees, dues, conference fees, etc. Next steps, so program and revenue component, we'll talk about on March 27th. That will also include transportation. So that'll basically, we'll wrap up from the budget process as far as like what's going to be there from that aspect. There'll be a contingent budget meeting on April 10th. The board would adopt the 23-24 budget ideally on April 17th. There'll be a budget hearing on May 8th, and the budget vote would be May 16th. Okay, and then time for questions.
Thanks, Brad. The first question I've got is, you said there was a clerical ad, so where is that and what is the background on that position?
At this point, we're basically looking at with some of the retirements, and we've got some folks that maybe could retire as well. And so based on that, what we've done is we've added a 1.0 in there. We're not really sure what the exact, whether we're going to have a retirement or not. So that's what it's planned for at this point, but it's something that I think will evolve as we keep going a little bit and then talk about, what specifically the needs are. But I think there is, based on Jeff, Mary, that are going to be retiring, Bill's gone, that kind of thing. We're going to talk about that. Okay.
Brad, I appreciate this. I guess my confusion with it is, if I look at, for example, the BOCES admin services fees page, is the budget codes.
Yep.
I don't know what they are.
Yep.
It would be, and that's the case on each of these, and it's very hard for me to track from this what's increased, what's not, because it's just a code number. And so only speaking for myself, it would be really helpful to know what those codes are. If it was the category instead of the code number, or put both, or give us a master key, or something. For my look at this, that would help tremendously.
We can do that. Some of it, what I try to do, for instance, in the BOCES administrative service fees, basically the three in the bottom bullet Those three actual titles, administrative fees, facilities, rental, and BOCES capital project, are literally the actual names of them. Some of the other ones, you're right, it gets to be, there could be 30 codes in there, so. At the previous district, we had money less codes, but we'd actually show it line item by line item. It got a lot more involved, but again, it's 4 times the volume here. So I'm open to kind of putting it into work, because it is difficult for you. You're just gonna see basically the XXX after it, and then have to try to make some kind of correlation as to what specifically we're talking about. So I'll figure out a way to kind of give it to you where maybe a better job that basically you can correlate between what are we really talking about, what specific things. The plan of what I've done is basically anything to do with where it's driven the budget. I've tried to kind of plant that in there where you've got that we've added 1 clerical position, or that includes an administrative intern. Everything else that's pretty much in there, it really does follow the negotiated contract, and then if there's a budget to actual where you might have, put what you projected thought to be, and then there might have been some kind of a stipend or whatever that needed to be in there included, and then that's that small true up.
Yeah, no, I see that, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Mine's just an issue of just following what,
Yep.
being a little bit aligned.
Well, if anything, we might be able to, we'll talk, but maybe there's something I can include as like a, on a side thing where like you could follow along with that, and it would actually drive what, what the presentation would have. I've done that too. You're welcome.
Brad, thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
And in addition to, I think Dan's question was a good one. It'd be interesting to see which aspects of the budget we have some level of control over versus ones that are completely contractually negotiated. So they they are what they are versus options for any movement on.
Okay. No, understood. It's one of those, I think in all codes we've got, we might have, 1,500. So I can appreciate it, and it's one of those you can show them in certain areas. So we'll figure out a way to basically be able to give you that kind of information, but we could have just in one area probably 25 different contractual-based items, which are going to be driven totally by contract, and some could be as low as 1,000, or then you could have a grouping of 200 teachers. So, but this is kind of what I expected. We'd go through the process and find something that works.
Any more questions?
Last thing I was just going to say is, so the next time when I come, we'll have a lot more involvement because it's going to be programmed, the largest part of the budget. We'll have transportation, we'll have revenue, and then at the end, what I wanted to do, and I think I talked to the audit committee folks, is I'm going to bring the 3-part, basically our, the actual 3-part portion of the budget that we actually put out with the newsletter. We'll tie it all together with that, and then everything you'd have would ideally, come together from that aspect. So we'll figure out something on the detail side, but thank you.
One other, are there any early projections on foundation aid and where that's heading?
$4 million was the projected number. Increase, yeah, to where they reran the formula. I haven't heard anything beyond that. Ideally, April 1st-ish kind of thing is when we'll be talking revenue. For the most part, everything I've seen, I've got most of the program booked. I think we're in a good spot, and it'll be something that, that I'm not foreseeing anything where would be any cuts or anything like that. So I do believe we have the corresponding revenue and have a good solid plan for what we're going to offer for programs and services. Okay, thank you.
I just had one more question. In terms of the 3-part budget, are we looking at similar increases percentage-wise for each component part? Because that would also be helpful just to see a comparison as we isolate and look at each part separately.
Yeah, I've got it broken down, Rebecca, where you can basically, that 3-part, you can almost go line by line. So each subheading, we can go forward, and it'll basically show us the increases overall. For the most part, it's very similar from that aspect. You will get into where there's certain things where I like to go through and define what's really going to be surplus versus what's going to be truly, in the budget from that aspect. So I'll tell you what pieces are in there as I go through the presentation and talk about, here's something we're going to add for a couple spots that maybe from a special needs aspect, high needs aspect, that's going to drive special ed. And I'll talk about, okay, we've added 2 slots here, and in case something happens, this will be something ideally for now, we listed as surplus. But from a percentage perspective, it's very similar to what we're seeing here. Okay. Thank you.
And as you will see when Brad presents in 2 weeks, the programmatic portion of the budget is the largest. I mean, if anything, administrative is under the 10%, and capital is around 15, 16%, and hopefully with these projects as they are coming online, that'll inch closer to the 20%, which is customary.
Okay, moving on to item 2.04, Superintendent's Report.
Thank you, President Mims. Capital project update, the backup information here is in your in board docs. The FM High School Capital Improvement Project is out to bid, and thanks to the efforts of our architects and construction management team, we are seeing interest in this long-term project. Accordingly, we are endeavoring to remain on schedule with bids being received at the end of this month so that the Board of Ed is able to award the bids to the separate prime contractors in mid-April. Construction would begin this summer, and the first thing everyone will see is the installation of the modular classroom suite in June. Our settlement with Jewel Labs, later in today's agenda, I will ask you to accept the settlement agreement from the class action lawsuit against Jewel Labs. While the settlement amount is less than some may have imagined, it does defray a portion of the costs with respect to the preventative measures that the school district has taken to combat the use of vape products in our school system. Under UPK update, as mentioned before, UPK registration is underway for the upcoming school year. Signs have been conspicuously posted throughout the community in an effort to remind our families about the registration period, which ends on March 31st. Thanks to the response to our RFP, we'll be able to accommodate 16 more UPK students in the upcoming school year. DEI committee update. Our 40-member district DEI committee met for the first time last week. As you recall, participants were chosen to represent the 8 stakeholder groups identified in the DEI regulation, which governs this committee, which includes students, parents, guardians, administrators, faculty members, support services staff, non-instructional staff, Board of Education members, and community members. Following the introductory remarks by yours truly and our following the introductory remarks by yours truly, our co-facilitators spent time in team building and some ice-breaking activities. School calendar. Later in today's agenda, I will ask you to adopt the upcoming 23-24 school calendar. The new calendar is replete with some significant changes, including 3 professional learning days at the beginning of the year that bookend Labor Day, and the move of the Spring Staff Development Day into mid-April. As you are aware, I'm proposing using an early release day on the Tuesday of May for the school budget vote instead of a professional learning day. This will help us to relocate the budget vote to possibly the new Wellwood Middle School cafeteria in 2024. Because the Wellwood Middle School shares the same campus as Fayetteville, we envision minimal disruption for those community members who are accustomed to voting at the elementary school. Speaking of school budget votes, the 23 annual budget vote and Board of Education election will be held at Fayetteville Elementary in 23. Presently, the date is scheduled as a professional learning day for all K-12 faculty and staff. Later in this evening's agenda, I will ask you to adopt the requisite resolutions in advance of the vote. Digital Equity Survey. In conjunction with State Ed, our instructional technology team is once again administering a digital equity survey to our families in order to ascertain access to the internet. The Digital Equity Survey is available in school tool accounts for families, and they only have to complete the survey once. State Ed will use the survey feedback to determine the school district's technology funding and needs. Director of Facilities. As you are aware, we will bid a fond farewell to our current Director of Facilities, Mr. Russ McCarty, and thank him for his meritorious service to the district. After serving our country in the United States Coast Guard, Russ began as a custodian at Wellwood and now concludes his nearly 40 years of continuous service to the district as the leader of our Buildings and Grounds Department. His knowledge of the behind-the-scenes infrastructure and his unwavering commitment at all hours of the day and night have ensured that our school buildings were operational for the teachers, staff, and students so that the teaching learning enterprise could move forward unfettered. This time is bittersweet for us as we say farewell to Russ, but we also welcome his successor, Mr. Jeff Brown, who is a veteran Director of Facilities and will continue the attention to detail approach for which Russ became known and famous. Thank you, Russ, for a job well done, and a hearty welcome to Jeff as the newest member of our team. And as far as the high school musical, last but not least, I'd like to thank our talented student thespians, student musicians, and faculty and staff for an outstanding production of Disney's The Little Mermaid. I know that this most recent musical production rivals any Broadway musical show, and I'd like to thank everyone involved for making this year's performance memorable. And last but not least, impromptu, I would like to ask our student board member, do you think we should have a snow day tomorrow with the governor's state of emergency? This is the first time ever at an FM Board of Ed meeting. What do you think?
I would definitely say so. That would be a good
Okay.
idea.
First time ever. Notice who I asked. So I will direct the administrators at the conclusion of the board meeting to make your announcements. Thank you.
Good job, good job. You're gonna be the most popular kid tomorrow, watch. Any questions for Dr. Tice in the first report?
I just want to take a minute to echo what Dr. Tice said, having chaired facilities for several years now, the input and knowledge base that Russ has brought to this district and the contributions have just been invaluable. So very, very grateful for his time and services.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we'll move on to Dr. Tice's second report on mental health.
I don't know how I top the snow day bit, but I'll give it a shot. Mental health. Once again, the backup information is available for the board members and board docs. We have an upcoming keynote presentation by Dr. Matt Balache. I would like to invite everyone to this keynote presentation. Matt is a speaker, comedian, and best-selling author. The presentation is scheduled for 6:30 p.m. on the evening of March 22nd in the high school auditorium. Dr. Balache will work with students during the educational day to discuss building resilience in teens and to teach stress management techniques. The after-hours event in the evening is open to all and free for parents, guardians, caregivers, and are all welcome to attend. Meeting with the county executive, I'm pleased to report that school officials met with representatives from the Onondaga County Executive's office, including the county executive himself. The district has signed up for and has budgeted accordingly for Tier 1 Promise Zone student engagement specialists, one each for each of the 3 elementary schools, and is partnering with the county for a student assistance program counselor from Contact Community Services in order to establish the aforementioned drop-in mental health clinic at the high school, which has been something, as all of you know, has been requested by our students. We have asked for these services to begin immediately as the county is able to secure the appropriate staffing. BIMAS administration, I'm pleased to report that the BIMAS mental health screener was administered in the elementary grades at Enders, Fayetteville Elementary, Mott, Wellwood, and Eagle Hill. We witnessed minimal opt-outs at the elementary level. As referenced before, the high school administration will restart here at the end of March. Mental Health Task Force. Now that the DEI committee is underway, we are looking to move forward with the Mental Health Task Force, made up of both internal and external community stakeholders, to discuss our mental health initiatives going forward. I know it kind of follows the DEI committee, but we certainly wanted to get Dr. Carmen and the RFP work that we approved in December moving forward, so the task force had something to discuss and evaluate. And then finally, meeting with the High School Safe Club. As I reported at the last meeting, thanks to our district clerk and the folks at K-12 Insight, the Let's Talk communication portal has been expanded to include for non-emergency and anonymous reporting of mental health concerns within the organization. These changes will be rolled out to the administrative cabinet at their upcoming meeting. So thank you to Sarah for all her work and moving forward with that. That concludes the mental health update.
Thank you, Dr. Tice. Questions for Dr. Tice in the mental health report?
Yeah, I just, sorry, it's you. Dr. Tice, I was just wondering, in terms of the county executive, it's great news to see that we're going to be expanding our services. I did just wonder about our middle schools. Looks like we're providing support, additional supports at the elementary and high school level. Just curious if that's something we're going to keep top of mind to make sure that we enhance supports in the middle schools as well.
Right now, we're strategically putting the student engagement specialists at the elementary school because of the increase in some of the behavior that we've seen down there. They certainly can float to the middle school. As you saw in the backup information that was requested today, we qualify for 3.5 FTE. So right now we're targeting it at the early levels, hopefully in a proactive way, but those individuals could be deployed to the middle schools as well. The student assistance counselor at the high school is similar, as you saw in today's backup information, to Ms. Sheila Coughlin, who just retired. She started as a student assistance program counselor. When the county stopped funding it a number of years ago, we absorbed that cost prior to my arrival, but it happened in districts that I was affiliated with before at Skaneateles and Marcellus. A lot of districts brought those student assistant counselors in to the fold. So this will give us the best opportunity to have a drop-in clinic at the high school where we perceive the greatest concern and needs are from the students. So it doesn't mean we can't revisit the middle school. I think this is the initial deployment, and then we can reassess as we go forward.
And so Craig, I guess, and it's wonderful news that we're adding the resources. What's our commitment to the county? So is this just to the end of the school year? Is it for the next school year? Is it for the next 3? Can you help us with that?
It's been year to year, but it's put in next year's budget.
I just have a timing question. I know the request has been made for immediacy. Do you have any feedback from them or thoughts on the timing of the drop-in clinic services at the high school?
Actually, that's the one I think we can move quickly on. I've already talked to Ms. Green and Mr. DeSantis, who, as you know, is a contact community service employee, so we're hoping, fingers crossed, to get that started even sooner. I know the county will have to hire the student engagement specialist, the promise zone specialist. That may take a little bit longer. As you may remember, we did sign up for the Tier 2 Access Helpline back when this whole program started. If you remember, the county rolled it out late one spring during the pandemic. We signed up, and then I believe it was March before the Access Helpline became available for us. So I do know there's a time lag depending on, hopefully it won't be as late as March. That's why we gave them directives to start now. We're keeping our fingers crossed that at least possibly they could be in place by the end of the year, but hopefully by the start of the new school year.
So Dr. Tice, the hiring of the Promise Zone Engagement Specialist is going to be by the county, but are they going to give us any discretion in that at all? Is there going to be like any interviewing on our part, or are we going to be able to say, look at the backgrounds of people and their skill set and ask for other folks, or how's that going to work, and how's the supervision going to work of those folks?
That's a great question. The county provides the supervision. I do not know if we'll get a slate of candidates that we can pick from, but certainly I know in other districts where things haven't worked out with some of those individuals that the county has been receptive to that feedback and has been able to swap out different individuals.
Other questions for Dr. Tice in the mental health report?
I just have one thing. I know you said something about the BIMAS coming back and being administered again. I was just wondering if students were being what's the word I'm looking for? If students were being informed about the results in a different way than last time, because I remember there was an issue with the confidentiality the first time it was administered.
That's a great question. I know that we had talked about that before, but as we debriefed about that feedback, we totally get where the students are coming from. But as the students are called out, you have to remember some meetings take 5 minutes and other meetings might take an hour, hour and a half, depending on the need, or if the student's in crisis. So I think every effort's going to be made to try to be discreet and to make phone calls and won't be over the public address. But at the same time, there's no way we can guarantee that it's seamless, that every period, you know, the notification. It could be a phone call to the classroom in the middle of the period. So we'll try to do our best. It's just because we're meeting with the students and some meetings are longer than others, there's just no way to choreograph that all to be as anonymous as I think some would like. But it's a great question. It's something I think your input before forced us back to think that through to see what we could do differently. But we run the risk of, you know, going beyond the school day if we try to make it at every bell, you know, in the bell schedule. Thank you.
Dr. Tice, regarding the additional services through the county, are we planning to revise or update our communication materials? Like, how are we going to make it clear to students what resources to go to for what kinds of issues? And, you know, I just want to make sure the communication is as clear as
District Clerk
possible.
and I have already talked about it. Yep.
Okay.
And we're still maintaining the current services too, so I think that's a good point. This is going to supplement what we already have. As you may have noticed, I did not say we're taking the Tier 3 services. I mean, we have that with Dr. Carmen already. We said we would start here, reevaluate that going forward, so now we're in for Tier 1, Tier 2, but that still means we're going to keep our family school liaisons. We still will use the access, but now we're going to try the student assistance counselor for the drop-in clinic, which now will complement what Dr. Carmen's able to offer at the Tier 3 level in terms of more intensive intervention.
I just have a follow-up on that, and I think the communication piece, not just community, but particularly in the school, is the most critical point of that, because we've heard that consistently, that students don't know all of the resources or haven't in the past known. And I think I'm not even in a position of clarity of, you know, for the 3-pack pieces through Dr. Carmen, that those were coming on referral from people going to our counselors. How does that work with relation to whoever is now staffing this drop-in clinic? Are they able to make the same referrals, or do those referrals only come through going to 1-pack? I want to make sure not only that we have a good understanding of that, but that the students have a really good understanding of the pathways available to them.
Yeah, we will do our best to get that word out, but you're right, that individual, just like Sheila Coughlin did as a social worker, she was certified as well, worked with our counseling staff to provide that. So, yeah, we will make folks aware of that's the main contact is the counseling suite. And we will have to find space for that drop-in clinic. Is that what you're?
Well, just as a fundamental piece, if somebody goes to this drop-in clinic, is that person able to make the same referral that a student would be able to obtain through going through the counseling?
I would assume so, talking to Ms. Green, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that individual may very well be in the counseling suite, depending on how everything shakes out.
Okay. If there are no further questions, we'll move on to item 2.06, committee and representative updates. Is there anything from audit committee, Daryl?
Just briefly, as you know, we met with Leslie for our meeting and hopes that she would be willing to come to the board, and she was. And we met with Jim Buffum virtually, who is our EFPR internal auditor, and he again gave us a nice clean report with no problems. We had to establish, and with the business office, we established that for the coming year, we'll ask our internal auditors to look at the expense of the universal pre-K transportation and also overtime calculations for custodial and maintenance staff. So that's what we'll be looking at closely. And I think that's it. Brett went over the the part of the budget that he did tonight with us as well, so thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. Any questions for Daryl? Community relations?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit more about adding more recognition just at the start of board meetings, and how that might flow. And Dr. Tice was going to talk to the administrators about that. Victoria, one thing we did talk about was student outreach, so we really wanted to try to better communicate and get a connection. So we talked about maybe if you're able to come to our meetings, or if there's another student who might be interested, if you can't come. But then we also were discussing student survey tools that are being investigated for that front. And then finally, we talked about the community survey results, some of the key topics that were brought up that seemed to be some themes. A lot of them were related to DEI and mental health, so things that were already on our forefront of topics here. And then we also wanted to highlight the fact that there was seemingly a high level of student engagement and sense of belonging and preparation for the next academic year. So there's certainly a message that the school is preparing our students very well, and a lot of positives out of the results as well. So.
Thank you very much. Sarah, next, facilities. Dan?
Yeah, it's a busy facilities time, so it's a very big month with bids out for the high school project. Hoping everything comes in the way we expect on that. It's been good to see there's been good interest in that. We're also working on facilities committee with a goal of trying to reach the end of this year with a more clearly defined long-range facilities plan, which is also going to back into, we're coming up on another building condition survey, which ties into that. And again, just for memory purposes, across the district, the high school plan is a significant project that is needed, that impacts the entire high school and all the learning spaces in it. But it is not the end of our district's needs, and we continue to have needs in a lot of our buildings that are going to continue to get addressed, not only through some capital transfer projects, but there will be upcoming facility projects as well that we do need to meet to make sure that we're providing the very best learning spaces that we can for our teachers and students. And then on the agenda later today is approval of the bids that came in on security audits that we do want to do again. This is part of our regular cycle of doing that, so that we're always keeping really two main things at the forefront of consideration on facilities projects. One is the ability to provide the very best learning spaces and opportunities that we can for our students, and second, to do so in the safest way that we possibly can. And so security always plays a role in every facilities project that we do, so those audits coming up for approval are very important going forward.
Do you want to say a word about April 10th and April 13th?
Patience would be when we're meeting to approve bids is going to depend on whether we have to extend the time for questions and clarifications on the bid packets that go out. We are trying to bring this to a conclusion as soon as possible. It's a large, complex project. If there are questions that come in, we may need to extend the bid deadlines by a week. We're looking not to do that. To my understanding, that has not yet happened. And if it does, then that will extend when we would need to meet to approve the bids that come in.
If you haven't yet responded to the doodle poll for that meeting, if you could do so as soon as possible so we can ascertain if we have quorum for that date, I would greatly appreciate it.
We wouldn't meet twice that week. It would be either the 10th or the 13th.
Any questions for Dan? Okay, policy committee, Sherry?
As you see on the agenda, we've made our way through the transition to NISBA for the 1,000 and 7,000 series, but that'll be approved at our next meeting. And then we're working on the 2000s right now. And when you do see the policy come up for for book, what is it called? The book challenges, it's 8330. Our committee discussed waiving either first reading or second reading on that, just so we can get it in place. So when that does come up to the board, keep in mind it's one that we need our questions in quickly, so we can get it approved quickly.
Marissa, I don't want to delay things any, but I know that the FM librarians have created a document that's called the Fayetteville-Manlius School District Libraries Collection Development Guidelines, and I wondered if there could be a link to that inserted on that policy. Is that a possibility? Is that ever done?
Something we certainly can discuss at
Yeah.
policy.
It's a good idea.
I can forward it to you if you like, but
Could you send it to the whole board, please?
they work very hard, oh, of course, they
Thank
work
you.
very hard on it, and it hasn't gone anywhere, so just wondering if we couldn't link it.
Thank you. Anything else for policy? Okay, then the ad hoc DEI board committee met. We don't have a chair for that, but Rebecca, would you like to speak to that one? Thank you.
Sure, just to echo what Dr. Tice already said, we had a great kickoff meeting last week. 40 members attended, very enthusiastic to be there. Really set the tone with the facilitators, presenting an opportunity to ice break and get a sense of their backgrounds and also everyone else's backgrounds. It's a really diverse group. And I think at the end of the meeting, there was a lot of positive energy and desire to keep moving forward and start charting the path. So I think the biggest takeaway was that the committee will really be charting the course for the district in terms of what the priorities and initiatives will be. This is not board-driven, it's not top-down, and we got a chance to debrief with the facilitators at the end of the meeting and just set sort of a loose plan for the next few meetings. We'll be meeting monthly through June. Did I miss anything?
Thank you very much. Any questions for Rebecca? Legislative liaison, Sherry, do you have any updates for us?
No updates, but we have discussed that we should write a letter to Mannion and Serpia regarding the veterans exemption, along with the other first responder and senior citizens exemptions, in order to get them moving, that the state could fund it instead of having school districts do the funding of it.
Thank you. And last but not least, Victoria.
Okay, so we've had a lot going on with Dance Marathon lately since, it's this weekend, so the MCs are doing as much as they can to raise money. So yesterday was the Attilio's fundraiser, and that was a big success. They filled all the slots that they had available at the restaurant. And then last week they had a volleyball tournament, and this week, as the last week to host fundraisers, they're doing restaurant week throughout the district just to reach their goal if possible. And then the dance obviously is this Saturday, and hopefully it'll be a really big turnout. I had something about the musical, but that was already covered, so don't need to get into that. And recently, 2 students at the high school's mother, Mrs. Otis, came and spoke about her history with mental health to all the students, and that went really well. It was really appreciated by all the students, I think. She had a really good story. And then the last thing I had was the Pi Day assembly, which was supposed to be tomorrow, but if we are having that snow day, I don't need to get into that. Sorry, Mrs. DeBlois.
To reschedule Pi Days?
Oh, yeah, I have it on good authority that the alternate dates have been selected.
Excellent, okay. Okay.
Right, I do have it on good authority.
Moving on to item 4.01, approval of the minutes from the February 13th regular meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, Kelly. Second from Sarah. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. And no one's opposed or abstaining. Next, item 4.02, the 2023-24 school calendar. Is there a motion that it be resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District approve the 2023-24 school calendar as presented? Is there a motion? Thank you, Daryl. Second from Cindy. Discussion of the calendar. Jason. There you go.
Yeah, so I'll ask the first question. So Craig, in the past, I know we've talked about the budget vote date. There was always a safety concern, or at least that was the reason I was given about why we closed schools on those days and done a superintendent day. So help me to understand what's changed in the philosophy that now that's an early release day as opposed to a superintendent day.
Great question. That goes with the change of venue to Wellwood Middle School, where there are 2 emergency doors and restroom facilities in the cafeteria vestibule that will limit access to the rest of the building. So we can certainly put a CIRO or SPO there. And again, by not serving lunch that day with an early release date, as you alluded to, it'll allow the vote to take place at the same time. It's on the same campus as Fayette, so humans being creatures of habit, if some folks go to Fayette, we can redirect them to the Wellwood parking lot, and there's more parking at Wellwood as well.
Thanks. And then emergency closure days, how many do we have in the calendar? And I apologize if it's listed and I missed it.
In today's memo, it was 6.
6, okay.
Any additional questions regarding the calendar?
I'm looking at the important dates. We do have listed that our school recess day is on September 25th and then on April 10th. We have listed that they're called Yom Kippur and Eid al-Fitr, if I'm saying that correctly. So I guess that I'm just questioning whether we want to call them just release days, because if we put in the reason being the holiday, first of all, it kind of goes against our discussion of our separation of church and state. And secondly, people who have other religions may want their religion listed. So if we just called them school recess days, we wouldn't be tied into that. But that's just an opinion. It's up for discussion.
We can do that, and certainly, but it'd be the purview of the board. We wanted to secularize the calendar.
Well, that was one thing I was wondering about. I know we had talked at some point about even posted maybe on the website, but below the calendar was maybe a listing of key cultural, religious dates, so that at least people could be aware of significant dates that are when they're occurring, even if it's not a day off. Is that something we want to do?
How will we make sure that we're not excluding anyone? I wouldn't want, like, if you have a list, I think it's a great idea in terms of diversity and recognizing different cultures, but I wouldn't want us to miss anyone's holiday and not have it. I mean, if there's a way we can make sure that we're inclusive, I don't know if there's a calendar somewhere of all the holidays, et cetera. There's
Yeah, I think to Marissa's point though, would we have them all listed? How do we make sure we, I guess we can, it would be maybe a document that would be flexible. So if somebody raised one, we could add it in, because it's not a day off, it's just an acknowledgement.
And we can always,
Perhaps.
Say we're trying to be inclusive, we're learning, we're growing, so if we do miss one,
Yeah, I
please
think-
understand we didn't do it, to be exclusive of anyone's particular religion. I think the bigger issue, though, is making sure that we're incorporating that into our overall, the work that we're doing. We don't want to just not listing them, but we're also talking about them, different cultures, and in our classrooms, et cetera. I know there's a lot of that going on, but I think that was the request that was behind a lot of these recognitions, was making sure that we're validating a lot of different cultures and beliefs.
I just want to, I don't know that I'm comfortable right now taking out the reference to the holidays in the calendar. I know we had an initial discussion about, you know, the secular nature and, you know, church and state and all that, but I don't know that we came to any conclusions. So I think that's a good discussion to continue to have. I have my own further thoughts about it. And I think until we've, you know, I know we weren't all there either, so it just, I don't know, I'm a little hesitant to change the reference to it right now until we've had some further discussions and come up with you know, what the board and the district agree is what we should be doing going forward.
The way it is right now is sort of it's a blend of it. You have the recess day, you know, it says recess day, but then it also says what it traditionally was, or includes the new recognition of the Eid holiday. So, I mean, that's sort of a transition towards it being more of a secular calendar. Is everyone in agreement that we keep it like this, the way it is right now, with the recess day and the traditional holiday? And then as we have board discussion, we'll see if we want to just have it listed as a staff development day or whatever. Well, I think we can have some discussion about it. We may all end up there. But as Kelly said, we didn't have a discussion as a board about it yet. So I think, you know, until we have that, perhaps it's a good idea just to have it this way, and we may change it, we may not. But I do like the idea of having further discussion as a board, because it is a very big, important issue. Is everyone good? All right, so I had a first and a second, and we've had some great discussion. All those in favor of approving the calendar, please indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Thank you. Next, item 4.03. Is there a motion that it be resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District approves the secret resolution, type 11 action, bus proposition as presented? Thank you, Dan. Second from Jason. Excuse me, discussion?
So I would just suggest that we, as we talked about after Brad reported last meeting about the e-buses, that we maybe have some communication updates on our website in advance, because I think people are going to be wondering about the purchase of more diesel buses.
I think that was something we agreed to. Certainly, thank you for that reminder, Sarah.
We can do that.
Any additional questions? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? Next, we'll move on to item 4.04. Is there a motion that it be resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District approve the secret resolution type 2 action, transfer to capital projects as presented? Is there a motion? Thank you, Dan. Second from Rebecca. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. And no one's opposed or abstaining. Next, we'll move on to item 4.04. Is there a motion that it be resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District approve the secret resolution type 2 action? Oops, wait, sorry. Nope, I just did that one. I'm on 4.05. Is there a motion that it be resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District approve the 2023-24, I believe that should say, it's 23-23 in here, annual budget notice as presented? Is there a motion? Thank you, Daryl. Second from Cindy. Discussion? All those in favor indicate aye. Aye, and no one's opposed or abstaining. And we'll change that action to have the correct date. It's got 23-23. Yep. Okay. Yep. And then we're going to, those have been tabled. Moving on to 4.09. Is there a motion that it be resolved that the Board of Education of the Fayetteville-Manlius Central School District approves the settlement agreement as presented? This is the Jewel settlement. Is there a motion? Thank you, Jason. Second from Rebecca. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. And I think he's gonna say aye, but I just wanna make sure. Was that an aye, Dan? Sure, aye. Anyone opposed or abstaining? No. Thank you. All right, next, item 4.10, the Health and Welfare Services Contract with West Hill School District. Is there a motion that the Board of Education authorizes the school board president and district clerk to sign the contract for health and welfare services provided by West Hill Central School District for the 2022-23 school year? Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Sherry, for your second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye, and no one's opposed or abstaining. All right, so then we're going to future meetings calendar, and we will get back to make sure everyone has responded to the doodle regarding the April meeting. Dates to remember. Where? Dates to remember. Oh. I don't know. Okay. All right. Moving on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Dan, second from Sherry. All those in favor indicate aye. Aye, and no one's opposed or abstaining. And then we'll move on to item 9, which is a proposed, 9.01, which is a proposed executive session for the purpose of discussing the promotion, appointment, or employment of a particular individuals. Is there a motion to move into executive session for that purpose? Thank you, Rebecca. Second from Jason. Any discussion? All those in favor, please indicate aye. Aye. No one's opposed or abstaining. All right, so the board's going to move into executive session, and we will not have any further public portion of the meeting. We'll adjourn immediately thereafter. Thank you all for coming.